Bungalow Bill here. Between the last episode and now, I've been working on another vehicle, and it's been more of sort of a fun fan build type thing. Where this is sort of my take on a medium difficulty campaign craft. It has obvious flaws in it, which we'll go over, but in many ways it's not gimped the way that some campaign craft currently are. The systems that it uses are actually intended to be built well, even if the overall design of the craft suffers in a few places. And there's not much of this campaign left. Hopefully this will be the last episode, but I'm also intending to use this vehicle. You can see that for each sort of parapet area, I experimented with a few different things to see how, sort of to get the Onyx Watch aesthetic. The different Onyx Watch craft do their crenellations in different ways, and it works well for some of them, and for some of them it doesn't. You can see for some of these as well, I did slightly different strategies for the walls. This one might be my favorite, the double wall thickness, but I don't know yet. I also didn't finish the interior, but I decided rather than redoing all of the aesthetics to be consistent, I'll just start a new craft that I'll aim at a higher difficulty tier, but I will make in a similar manner. So I'll quickly pull this apart to, actually I probably don't want to move to the gun because it's mounted sideways, to show what the strengths and weaknesses are before I use it in the campaign. The primary one that you'll notice is it's a deck gun, and it's massive. That means that the center of mass for this vehicle is actually above the water, which it functions without pitch or roll props, but it has them because otherwise it does not take damage well. This is a huge amount of weight to keep above the water line, and because of that, and because of how much volume I'm holding here over the water line, it needs a lot of empty volume under the water line in order to stay afloat, which is a huge weakness for this. However, the deck gun itself is not necessarily massively vulnerable. There's a lot of metal before you get to the gun. It's a single barrel of a 3D Tetris, which is probably too much for a full HE cram. So the explosive damage is about 450,000, which is about a nuke. It basically just shoots nukes. And the explosive radius is way over the 30-meter cap that actually gets used. So when I rebuild a higher difficulty variant, I'll probably shoot multiple APHE shells, because I'll still be going for the Onyx Watch theme, so I won't use frag, even though frag's just better. I do wish that HE cram was good. Like, HE something should be good. Well, except over torpedoes, I guess. And I wish it was cram. You know, although the gun itself is well protected, the turret base is not necessarily as well protected. This is a fairly severe weak point. There just aren't that many layers of metal, and it's not as well connected to the foundations of the ship as it looks from the outside. You'd imagine that there's just a solid brick of metal going down. There isn't. It's thin walls on either side. And in addition, to save down on costs and such, the deck is one layer of wood and then half a layer of metal. And then the inside, a lot of empty space to keep everything buoyant. Little AI compartment, there's no heavy armor anywhere on the ship. And then there are a few turbocharger engines. Although this one looks like... Oops, I guess I placed injector engines. I meant to place supercharged engines. Not supercharged engines, I meant to place turbocharged engines, but I am definitely using injector engines. Well, there's actually... I might not even bother to go back and change this. There's plenty of space for turbocharged engine, but to use the prefab one, I would have to drop the floor by 1 meter, and I'm not actually sure I feel like doing that. And then she's fast for an Onyx Watch craft. before I turned down the allowable motor power on and RPMs on some of these motors, it was actually too much, and she would kind of get up out of the water and get going about 40 meters per second. But I toned that down so she stays in the water now. And then the Onyx Watch ships always have these blunt bows like castle walls, but I don't think the Onyx Watch would just burn all of their oil to move ships like that, so I think it makes sense for them to have bows like this. Anyway, let's get back into the campaign and try to destroy what's left of the Grey Talons and Scarlet Dawn. So I've decided that I want to use the Calderas in a battle, but I don't want to spawn them sort of in one of my main areas and fly them all the way in. So I decided to just make a few transport craft and fly the materials I need to build them into the front lines. Imagine how scary it would be if the Onyx Watch actually did this, if they just had a rapid transport craft and would just build things on the front line with you instead of solely steaming them over at 5 meters per second. So I don't think this will be the most interesting battle from a tactical perspective. There's not much in the way of enemy vehicles in here. We've got one Zephyr, and then we have the Raven's Nest, and I'm just going to be destroying it with 2 Tychos, one of which still has its onboard ramming vehicle. But sometimes it's just fun to shoot things with railguns, and that's just what we're going to be doing right now. Let's stabilize that camera. We will take some damage from the Raven's Nest, but it probably won't be that severe compared to what we're dishing out. Although it looks like one of our Tychos... No, it's targeting the Raven's Nest. They're both targeting the Raven's Nest. So, one thing that you may have noticed is that I am not necessarily... I don't have the most varied voice, especially in terms of emotion, and I used to teach sailing at Jackknife Point, actually, which is in Chatham. And for that, it was this program where they actually had us on individual boats with students, which, you can't pay your instructors very much if you do that, which, I don't know, I feel like I kind of, well, not the best sailor, could have, done a little bit better than that, but at least it was still good for the students in a lot of ways, because the ones who actually wanted to learn stuff, I could also teach a lot more than just sailing. I could teach knots and that sort of thing too as well while we were on the water. But there was one day where we started getting called in, and as far as I could tell, the weather wasn't that bad and that sort of thing, and they weren't telling us why they were calling us in either. So I was looking around for a while, and I eventually saw a funnel cloud coming down over Harwich. So I, of course, didn't tell my students that either, because I figured, the reason they're not telling this is so that no one is panicking. So we sail back to the docks. We start to clean up the sails and stuff while we're waiting for the motorboat to bring us back in. And I tell my kids, we should probably hurry this up a little bit. It looks like we've killed the Raven's Nest. We got to AI dead it. Told my kids that we should probably hurry this up a little bit. And I looked around to check on the funnel cloud to see how it was doing. And then one of my kids must have had a similar train of thought to me when the instructors were telling us to come in the first place, and I followed my line of vision to the funnel cloud, and all that he said was, "You don't sound terribly excited." Anyway, I'm going to fast forward through this Raven's Nest being destructed. Oh, and by the way, the funnel cloud never actually did touch down. I don't think there's ever been a tornado that's actually touched down on Cape Cod during my lifetime. We've had waterspouts, though. Moderately stormy seas, but actually a fairly clear day for Grey Talon territory, so we might be able to see what's going on in this fight. Which is probably immediately going to be shooting down a Thundershock, but... which for some reason the Apollo is targeting first. I don't actually know why it would target that over the Sailfish. Or maybe it just spawned facing it, so that's what it shot immediately. But we have an Apollo versus 2 Sailfish and a Thundershock, so it's actually pretty fair. It's got lambs, though. The lambs might sort of... oh, it's spinning around a bit. Hopefully the EMP protection on the Sailfish does its job. I haven't... well, the EMP protection on the Apollo is not doing its job. I haven't really tested the Apollo against EMP. No, not the Apollo. I just tested the Apollo against EMP. I haven't tested the Sailfish against EMP. It looks like it's fine. It's just not moving. The Cistern has the same issue, where when I was doing combat tests with them in the designer mode, it was fine. And something's just different now. They're just all sitting there. Probably once this campaign's over, I'll go take a look at them and see if I can figure it out. It doesn't make much sense to me, though. It's moving a bit now. I think... and I can check something later. Yeah, these probably... The hover card gets put in by default when you put in the circling ship AI card for some reason that absolutely escapes me. And it often tries to move your craft by translating it or rotating it in place with no forward thrust. And that doesn't work for boats. At least it doesn't work for the boats that I have here because they don't have turning thrusters. And they don't have any translational movement. So this needs to use the ship or tank AI card. I just forgot. The Cistern... I think I fixed that, but I think I have versions in the campaign that don't have the fix. So they have the same issue. I don't know why that's the default movement card. It's just a way that even though I know better, I still get got by it. There's just so much to remember in this game that I often forget until I notice that my ship's not really working the way it needs to. Despite the massive, well, I say massive, it's not horribly massive resource disadvantage, and the fact that for some reason some of my guns seem to shoot at the Magnetar first. Oh, this is a transient, isn't it? There's a Magnetar in here somewhere. Pretty sure this is a transient. Yeah, there we go. I don't expect the Scarlet Dawn to be the biggest problem. It costs about 200,000 more, but it's not a super scary craft. It's still... shouldn't underestimate it, especially when I'm fighting it with a blimp. And some of my cost is in a drone that's not even in the fight. Looks like we're switching broadsides. My craft likes to fight on one broadside or the other. It looks like it probably starts starboard broadside. That was a big internal detonation. I can't tell if our smoke is working. We're at 98%, so presumably it is. We probably would have taken a lot of damage otherwise. Interesting. Looks like those turrets can't quite shoot at this angle. Scarlet Dawn is really moving away from us quickly. I don't know if this is intentional or if it lost some turning ability. Also, unless those steam particles are intentional, it's not having a good time right now. A lot of APS components lost from that turret, I believe. Also, we don't do that much explosive damage, really. We only have a little bit of APHE, so a lot of our damage was probably from some ammo components getting destroyed inside. Scarlet Dawn's at 87%, we're at 97%. We're a bit too far away to have any particularly good luck hitting with our base bleeders, and it looks like the Scarlet Dawn's going down. Possibly a few more good hits there. It was sort of hard to tell with some of those. I don't feel like... I can't really move to zoom in on that, but those were AI card components, and the Scarlet Dawn is AI dead. Not particularly heavily armed. It still packs a moderate punch, although that's really just a scratch for this vehicle because the external armor is basically just the skin of light alloy. let's see. So we're shooting the transient on our left and getting a little bit of fire at the Magnetar in front of us, which I think the Magnetar does actually have weapons. At least I thought it did. Well, it has a little bit of missile now, but I think it has something. I don't remember what it is that we probably knocked off already. It is primarily a harvester, though. Second shots didn't go all the way through. I didn't see much fallout, though, but the Magnetar is listing heavily and starting to slide to the side now. Look like some anti-missile pods. I don't know if that's what the missile firepower is coming from or not. Also see some steam components that aren't really connected to anything anymore. There is technically one base of the Scarlet Dawns that I didn't fight. The Archangel Observatory. I didn't feel like fighting all those Archangels. I didn't really have a whole lot here that could shoot up that well. The Tycho is not particularly optimized for that, having the guns on the bottom. Well, at least we can't really miss from this range. That's a big chunk coming off. Yeah, those are held on very delicately. I mean, it's not a combat ship, so that's not a critique of it, of course. Oh, man. Well, we've got a long way to go to get back to that craft. Oh, look, it's shooting at us. Huh, we took damage too. Not sure if that's us. It must have been us shooting ourselves. Unless we get a lucky hit, this would be much faster if I rebuild the reamer now, although I don't know where the blueprint is. Gotta love those mountains popping in from the draw distance. Are these just, yeah, really sci-fi looking cram cannons, but you can still see the cram components. And it was a cram shell that was shot at us. This angle's a little bit bad for us because the transient's nearly underwater and we're bouncing at this range and height with our bolts coming in at this angle. Not all of them are bouncing off the water, but a lot of them are. Few decent internal explosions there, though. We'll hopefully make short work of the transient, especially now that we're getting closer, our shots aren't bouncing off the water as much. That was an interesting place for it to detonate, given where it penetrated. And it's AI dead. Yep, I see AI components bouncing all over the place right now. I believe that is the last Scarlet Dawn craft that we'll have to kill. Let's wait for it to despawn, and we should get a pop-up. With the enormous wreck of the ancient starship smoldering in the water, the plague that has troubled Nidar is finally over. Any survivors of your wrath have scattered to the wind, and those that aren't caught by your troops will soon succumb to the hostile environment. Whether you are a liberator who has finally freed the land from an alien incursion, or a psychopath who has committed genocide on an entire species is irrelevant. Although, I believe this has been retconned by now. All you know is that there's only room for one planetary conqueror in this world. Anyway, just one more left to go. Although I think they have 2 Raven's Nests. And I think we're actually going to have to watch me destroy both of them because I'm not going to skip me destroying the last one. And the next one is going to be the first showing of the Caldera, and possibly also the last showing of the Caldera. Here is, that's probably either the second or third to last battle in the campaign. There is, other than this Raven's Nest, there is 1 dreadnought, 1 ICBM, and 1 other Raven's Nest left alive. I've spawned in 3 of my Calderas, and you can see one of their flaws as well, that despite they have a fairly modest cost, it's 28,000 volume. It's a lot. To really have fights with a lot of cost in them, you need to build denser than this. They also really like to get up into opponents' grills, so they're going to try to close to, I believe, 500 meters with the Raven's Nest. I also brought in a Ramses to give them a little bit of support. I suspect that 3 Calderas would win against the Raven's Nest anyway, but I wanted to give them a little bit of extra help. I don't know what the Raven's Nest is going to shoot at. It looks like it's shooting at the Calderas, although the missiles are going for the Ramses. Those lambs not stopping those nukes. A little disappointing, only 710,000 explosive damage. I see some APS components mixed in with that armor. We'll see if I can get a decent shot. Yeah, so that's where at least one of them hit. Possibly as many as 2. The reload's somewhere around 22 seconds, I think, so hopefully we'll get the next shot coming in soon. You can see the Calderas getting right in there. They're brawlers. They use cram cannons, so they have to be. They also don't have active defenses, so they just take everything on the chin. That's how the Onyx Watch should be. We only shot 2 shots that time. Sometimes they have trouble turning towards the enemy a little bit. The AI cards don't like to function very well, but huge amount of damage from the 2 shots that we did get. There's one more, lopping off another turret. Smoke's lingering for a while though, so it's hard to see exactly what damage we dealt. They just do such massive amounts of damage though. It's really fun to shoot these Doom HE shells, even if they're not very good. They're really not. I don't know why our Calderas are all sort of collecting in one place. It probably has to do with the wave action. Yeah, I think they're all still working. I think one was just having trouble facing for a bit. Ooh, this is getting very close to an AI dead kill on the Raven's Nest. That's where the AI compartment is. It's very thickly armored, so I don't see them get AI deaded that much. But yeah, that was a bit close. I think that's it. I think they only have that one AI. I could be wrong about that. They're all still aiming, but I'm not sure they're all shooting right now. One of them... Yeah, one of them was waiting to fire over the other one. If any of that HE damage got into that AI compartment, the Raven's Nest is now AI dead. But no, it is not. So far we're looking pretty good. I think I could have brought the Calderas by themselves. Although I wish they didn't bunch up like that. I put them kind of close together because the smaller an arc you fight the Raven's Nest in, the better, but I didn't want them to get in front of each other like this. They're handling the waves okay. This damage is very minor though. Mostly just wood taken off. I think a lot of these compartments that took damage aren't even ruptured. Still hanging on, even with his brain hanging out. It's almost despawning due to damage anyway. Ooh, that one was a pretty nasty shot. I don't think there's much in the way of engine components left either, so even if we stopped shooting at it, I think it would kill itself. We've still got enough health left that I might roll this fleet up to the next one. Sometimes it's just fun to shoot giant explosives, even if they're not good. Through my testing, the stats for sort of materials destroyed per materials used are shockingly bad on these cram cannons. It's something like 8. But I tested them on medium difficulty craft, especially medium difficulty boats, and those tend to be giant blocks of metal. And you never destroy those terribly cost effectively, stuff like the Kingstead and the Victoria and that sort of stuff. Oh, and the Trondheim. At least before I turned the roll and pitch thrusters on the bottom of these on, they fought about evenly with the Trondheim, so for their cost they're pretty useful, but the Trondheim, not a spectacular vehicle. Still, definitely a fun fleet. I think... So, I'm going to build another Onyx Watch fan build after this, which is going to be kind of similar in that giant cram gun, but I'm going to aim for higher difficulty craft, and I'm going to mount all of the cram components fixed in the hull with underwater, with just the barrels above water, so that it's, you know, more functional. I can armor it better. I don't have to keep so much mass above the surface of the water. And I can avoid using so much volume. But I'm also going to raise the cost a little bit, so maybe increase the cram firepower by about 50%, and then add on some Sea Whiz. So add on not much active defense. I still think that Onyx... maybe I'll use like 1 shield or 2 shields, but not very much shielding. I think the Onyx Watch should really be focused on, even though they're allowed to use weak lambs, taking things to the chin. That's just their sort of thing. So it'll still mostly be armor for defense, but a little bit of Sea Whiz so that it has some chance of shooting down small interceptors, missiles, crams, that sort of thing. Just making it a little bit more flexible and pushing up the price point to maybe the 400,000 or so, without hopefully pushing up the volume that much. I was also very lazy when designing this cram. It is an efficient Tetris, but it was only designed to be a 1-barrel cram. So I'm going to have to rebuild it with a different Tetris that'll support 4 barrels, and then I'll decide if I'm going to do 2 or 4. I'll probably do APHE and I'll probably do 2 barrels, but I don't actually know. Anyway, one more to go. One last battle before the Raven's Nest against a dreadnought and an ICBM. Hopefully we can see stuff a little bit, because our incredibly ugly detection mast, yeah, I haven't learned how to build them. Maybe I will at some point, but haven't yet. Spawned above water, but the rest of our craft spawned inside of a wave. And the cistern does rely on air pumps inside of the turret wells to maintain freeboard, so spawning underwater is actually really bad for her. There's a reasonable chance that we're just going to get nuked because we don't get eyes on the ICBM in time. We'll see. This is mostly an anti-air test. We've just got the dreadnought, which don't know if we fought it before, but it tends to go into the drink very early with all these exposed components. It's one of the few craft that flak will actually do damage to. This flak. So many components of craft that used to be weakly armored and used to take flak damage have gained so much armor. Okay, I see a few shots, a few flak shells exploding around the ICBM, and there we go. So our AA not completely useless, We have managed to get back above the surface of the water. I will try to see things through these giant clouds of flak. I do like how they look, though. And it looks like, nope, the dreadnought has maintained thrust. Man, even these flak clouds are not doing that much to these steady blades. It's kind of depressing. But there they go. A few have been blown off. Dreadnought's basically just going to sit in the water until we finally kill her, which may be hard because, yeah, this is our point of view. Well, we'll get there eventually, I am sure. There's also pockets of air between us and her. I don't know how radar and sonar is going to work here. I don't know how visual detection is going to work here. I might have to turn GPU water off for a second. Yeah, it looks like we're not really seeing her. Yeah, let's just calm the seas down a little bit. Put the wind back in the bag. I do like GPU Ocean to some extent, but I think it's a little bit too aggressive. I also think it causes minor performance issues on my computer. Eventually I'll get myself a new graphics card, probably when the next generation comes out, which will be, you know, scalped just as badly as... and just as unavailable as this generation. I'll just finally cough up the money to push myself 3 graphics card generations ahead, because my graphics card is getting bad enough that it's not able to always play some not graphically intensive titles as well as it should. Here we are, what should be the last battle of the campaign. When we destroy this fortress, ICBMs would spawn, but I believe the campaign will just immediately end. And all of the Grey Talons vehicles would despawn anyway, so no ICBMs. This is exactly the same fleet that you saw in the last time we were fighting a Raven's Nest. A little bit of the damage has been healed by the Ramses because there's a few repair tentacles, but not all of it because it hasn't been in repair range for very long. Spread out my fleet a little bit more, but it looks like we'll probably still have a few issues. Anyway, let's enjoy a little bit of carnage. We take the first shot immediately, followed fairly close up by the second one. It looks like it did not make it there, but the second one did. Not an ideal location to hit. Ooh, that's a good one though. Well, I suppose it still could be better, but decent components. And those are engine components flailing out of the bottom of the Raven's Nest's spire, because those are Hesh shells coming in from the Ramses, and I do not believe there's any spall liner. The Calderas do actually have spall liner in front, well, not spall liner, they have an air gap in front of their guns. I didn't put any spall liner in them. I sort of feel like at their difficulty that they shouldn't have that much. And I didn't want to inflate the volume any more than I had to. Ooh, you could see the blocks get destroyed a little bit before the explosion effect showed up. That's a pretty big chunk taken out of the armor there. I don't see many missiles getting diverted. I see what looks like AA missiles following the flare from the Ramses, but not much else. We're still 95% or above everywhere. That shell didn't get deleted. Maybe actually, the first shell of our engagement may not have gotten deleted either. Maybe the explosive effect just didn't appear. I do have degraded mode set to, I don't remember if it's off or 0 FPS or something, but degraded mode will never happen in my battles, no matter what the frame rate goes to. And really, the frame rate isn't... I say frame rate, it's more like the physics rate isn't that low here. Although my frame rate's not 144 hertz either. It's... I don't know what it is, but it's very visibly slower. But my computer can't maintain 144 hertz in many games these days. Okay, that was just the wave height. I was worried that she was floundering a bit. So, given how much metal is in the front of this is basically just a scratch, although this is finally starting to get there. I think it's 8 meters of metal, which for its size is quite a lot, but that's about 2 layers of heavy armor. So once you start getting to larger craft, it stops looking like so much anymore. Well, we caved off an entire section there, although there wasn't really much left of that section. Although, when you see them at that slow frame rate, that close up, those explosion decals do leave a little bit to be desired. They look pretty good from a distance, so I'm pretty satisfied with them. I knew there was an engine there, but I barely recognize engine parts as engine parts these days. I always think that they're APS components when I look at them. I do think that it was an improvement. I do think that they look a lot better now. But it's hard for me to tell them apart from each other. And since they have such similar coloring to APS components, I just always think that they're APS at first. I don't remember exactly what my camera speed is set to, but when I'm holding shift down, I think it's double the default. I found that was roughly what I had to set it to for it to work at all. And in building mode, which you haven't seen that often because I only have a very small number of clips of me actually building something live. And it actually may look sped up sometimes. I believe I have the cursor movement speed, which you can adjust sort of when you hit W, A, S, and D, how fast the block moves. I believe I have that doubled, and that I have the double tap movement also doubled. Just because when you're building big things, it can take so long to move around them. I basically I could probably turn it up higher. The sort of, that's a nice hole to see through. The sort of idea is that I like to have the normal block scroll movement speed, that when you just hold down the arrow keys, how fast your cursor moves in build mode. I like that to be so high enough that if I single tap, just a comfortable single tap speed, I just barely don't move 2 blocks. I still do sometimes, but sometimes the game lags a little bit. And when it drops frames, it seems to have some issues with that. Time taken, 9 hours and 26 minutes. I believe that's the longest time that it's ever taken. Now, I don't believe that this can go into the scoreboard or anything, because I wound up playing some sections of this with automatic detection on by accident, because although you probably saw in one of the videos that it warned me and I turned it off, I believe I had 2 different episodes where it did not warn me or turn it off. One of which I believe I noticed and turned it off. The other one I didn't even realize until I was editing. But I didn't say anything about it during the video. A lot of the times when I notice things, I'll put some text over the video and explain what I got wrong or what I noticed. For that one, I did not. If any of you noticed it, you can say something. I don't even remember what video it was. I thought about saying something about it, oops, and then explaining, but I couldn't be bothered. It can be annoying to put the text in sometimes. Well, I don't think I've ever read this screen before, so I'm going to read it. With the last headquarters falling beneath your overwhelming forces, the remaining inhabitants of Nieder now look at you with mixed views. Some see you as a hero who has broken the bonds of war through bravery and valiant command. Others see you as one of the most brutal tyrants to ever be known in the history of the galaxy through your brutish and merciless tactics. The remnants of the factions will dissolve, and surely new factions and alliances will be born in your wake. Not on my watch. You started off as a fledgling, betrayed youth, built your forces against the odds, then went on to take over much, much more. Your mind scrambles to think what your parents would think of you if they could see you. Would your distant father be proud of your wealth despite your tactics to get it? Would your mother be terrified of you despite the success in what you came to be? To have overcome the fear of pirates by being one yourself? This is a common place. It's hard to say who is right and who is wrong in the world of Nieder. However, there is one thing for certain. This is the second semicolon so far. Anyway. The greatest engineers are among the most powerful inhabitants here. Perhaps one day, even the one who was originally known as the River Rat will find themselves at the feet of someone else who has risen up in their quest for Nieder. Well, they're assuming that there are any inhabitants of Nieder left after my campaign was over. And I'm also imagining, because it didn't bring up the high scores list, that's also sort of symbolic, or that means that it did in fact recognize that I played with the wrong settings at times. I also did notice that at a certain point after I'd made the mistake the first time, I stopped getting the achievement dings for destroying factions. Well, anyway, that wraps up this playthrough of Nieder. And I've played quite a bit of From the Depths this week because I tweaked one of my fingers a bit last Sunday, almost a week ago when I was climbing. So instead of climbing this week, I was playing more From the Depths than usual. So I'm probably going to take a short break, maybe a week or so from the game, or at least from sort of normal content videos, but I'm still going to pluck away at a build or two of mine that I want to do. After that, I have a new series that I want to do. I haven't said what it's going to be yet, and once I film the first video, if I don't like it, and just sort of quietly brush it under the bed, I may never say what it was going to be and may figure out something to do instead. Time will tell. Anyway, I believe that is enough From the Depths for one day, and I hope to see you in the future.